welcome to the Blue Corner into a Cardfight Vanguard premium format deck profile. That's right, we're going back to the premium wall again because the collection's been fully revealed, we know what's in it, and obviously as a Narukami stan, I've got some things to say about what we're getting out of the set, and I'm sure a couple people would like to hear my opinion as a Narukami stan. So with that being said, let's get into it. So right off the bat, I'm just going to say we're eating well out of the set. Like, we got one of the best strides in the set, not the best stride. I think that actually goes to a couple other cards, but Exterminate Dragon, please forgive the bad proxy. I ran out of some ink. Exterminate Dragon is a very, very good card, and it serves as a nice complement to Stun vs. Dragon, which is really what I could have hoped for. Because, like, when Stun vs. Dragon exists, what do you really print for Narus? Because this card does a lot, and some people actually think it should be banned, but I don't believe so, but we're not going to get into that here. But yeah, Stun vs. Dragon is so very good, so what do? Do you print something that's just so weak that you ignore it, or so busted that we have something worse than New Dio? Instead, they went the it works with Stun vs. Dragon route with Execute Dragon, and as a result, every Narukami deck really benefits from Execute Dragon, except Dungri. That deck doesn't run enough front row removal, I think, to really make it work, but it does remain as an option because now this Execute Dragon exists. Your opponent basically has this situation of, do I call a board and get it bound by Stunverse, or do I not call a board and let Execute Dragon go super plus on me? And that's a neat little interaction that will make your premium games going forward quite fun for you, less so for the opponent. So with that being said, let's get into it. So as far as decks that you can play in the format, I already mentioned Dungri is one of them. I don't think that really works that well with this, but it's an option. Dungri premium deck does exist. I don't have Dungri cards, so I'm not going to talk about that. As far as the more competitive builds go, you've really got Vanquisher and Eradicators. Vanquisher is literally the same as it always has been for the last bit, so I'm not going to show you guys another version of Premium Vanquisher. It's just a matter of you cut some cards to make room for a card I think you should be playing in Naru lists going forward. It's in here too. So instead, we're going to be talking about Eradicators, because I haven't really had an opportunity to talk about Premium Eradicators or Eradicators as a whole in quite some time, as it's just really been like other Narukami decks that have been better. But Eradicators have been getting better as they keep releasing more Eradicator named cards in these V collection sets, Vowing Sword Dragon being one of the more recent bosses. I know there's mixed opinions on the Vowing Sword deck alongside Stun vs. Dragon, because some people feel it's not as great as, say, being on Gauntlet Buster Dragon and pressuring your opponent with meaty crit swings and whatnot. But I think for the context of this format, there is definitely merit to playing a Vowing Sword focused build because of his abilities to pair nicely with Stun vs. Dragon alongside your Resanders. The fact that his Break Ride ability allows you to target cards on the binds in the drop zone for your binds, namely the Book Order against Mega Colony, and that's important because with the stride coming out in the set, Order Colony is pretty much the best deck in the format. Like, it was already arguably best deck in format before the set dropped, but the new guy means that you're going to be seeing more of it, and being able to bind that Book Order against the Bug deck is very important. Being able to bind targeted cards in the Grand Blue matchup, another very popular deck in the format, is also important. So I think Vowing Sword Dragon, for his Break Ride ability alone, is worth considering as your main boss monster in this deck, and that's why I'm maxing out on him and not going on a Gauntlet Buster route. So yeah, not much to say here. This is just good stuff for Eradicators. I'm not playing the defensive cards because I had to cut some cards out to make room for some other stuff in here. If you want to go that route with the Colin Shanks and the Unruly Dragons and whatnot, be my guest. This is just a template for people to work with. Shoutouts, by the way, to Vibuster Franz, because I got this list idea from a list he posted in the Living Proof Discord and made some adjustments to suit my likings. So yeah, let's get into this. So for the starter, any Eradicator, or rather any V-Series starter will work. I'm not playing the Descendant Superior Ride stuff. I think it's just too bricky in the context of this format when you want your stuff to be good right away. So we're not going that route. So for the Great Threes, 4 copies of Vowing Sword Dragon. So for those of you who don't know what he does, he's got a couple skills. The first one is when your opponent's normal unit is bound other than from their deck during your turn, your opponent can search your deck for up to 1 card with the same name as that bound card and binds it. If they do, you give one of your units 5k in turn. If they don't, you give that unit 10k instead. So bit of a mixed bag on this one in particular, because like you're forcing your opponent you're giving your opponent the option to whether they want to bind or not, and like if they do, you give a unit 5k, and if don't, it gets bigger, which is nice and all, but like it's normal units only, which means you're helping your opponent compress their deck of non-triggers, which means if you use this skill way too much, you run the risk of your opponent just blowing you out with trigger sacking left and right, especially in a format with over triggers. Over triggers are kind of like a problem in this format, and Vowing Sword helps enable it. That being said, though, it does pair nicely with Exterminate Dragon, as we all know. It gets your board pumped up, and you play multiple restanders in here. Then his other skills are, when he is rode upon, you can call him to Rearguard Circle, and then for every 2 cards in your damage zone, you bind a card from your opponent's drop zone. This is that break right skill I was talking about. It allows you to bind Book Orders, Grenach, Skeleton Cannoneer, and whatnot. Like, if your opponent's playing a deck that wants specific cards in the drop zone, riding Vowing Sword over Vowing Sword, or Descendant on Vowing Sword, really helps to get those annoying cards out of the way. And therefore, I'm maxing out on this guy. We'll see what happens when the next set drops, because I think Vowing Sword Dragon reverse is all but a given. And for the backup grade 3s, we have the less than impressive Draconic Descendant. I was really disappointed when we got this guy. I was hoping he'd be more like Sigma and that he was a restanding rearguard. Instead, he's just a discount Kagero card, really. Like, so his effects are when you ride him on top of an Eradicator, he gains the effects of the Eradicator you rode upon. So Vowing Sword or some of your grade 2s, which is, and like, this guy effect is really dependent on what kind of Eradicators you have right now. We don't have enough strong Eradicators to really break this skill. Gauntlet Buster Dragon, I think, was what they intended for this guy to be rode upon for a nice double whammy, but Vanguard Rearguard Circle, once per turn, you can Soul Blast 1 to choose your opponent's front and rear guards, bind it, and then they pull something from back to front. That's not bad. Like, it's a Soul Blast 1 removal on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle, so you can always just call them up front and pop something. And on Vanguard Circle, lastly, once per turn, when his attack doesn't hit, -1, discard 1, restand, and drive -1. No crit gain, no power gain. Like, again, this is reliant on the cards you ride upon for this restand skill to truly matter. Like, if this card was in a Force deck, he'd be much scarier, but because it's an Axel clan, not so much. But you still play him because it's an Eradicator name, and he sometimes comes up. Then, rounding out the big guys, we have 3 copies of Arena Esperandia. Esperada? The Varina names have always been difficult to pronounce. So, Grade 4 Varina is obviously a card from the Overdress series, and the thing about this guy is that people might have to take him home with a grasp is that if you happen to be on a stride, you have a grade for Vanguard, therefore you just normal call this down and you can use him as a vanilla on Rearguard, except he actually has an effect on Rearguard Circle if you're not in Overdress state. So where a lot of people get confused on this guy is that when your Vanguard attacks, you Soul Blast 1 to restand it, but if it's an Overdress state, it gains power for what you have as your original dress. So if you're not in Overdress state, you still get a restanding 13k attacker or more, depending on what kind of power buffs you have, and therefore he's just a good restander to throw into this deck. And because Executed Dragon exists now, I think you should consider playing this in Vanquisher, Eradicators, not so much Vermilion, because that deck goes Vanguard first, but if it's a Narukami variant that's very good at clearing off the board, then you should play Varina because it's another restander you have, which allows you to just be more aggro with Executor Dragon. And on that note, we have even more restanders. Cho-Oh, you guys know what he does. He's good. Not much to say about Cho-Oh. Then 4 copies of Spark Race Dragon. When placed on Vanguard Circle, you can give him 5k, and then you look at top 5 for an Eradicator, add it to hand, and then discard 1 from hand afterwards. It's a good searcher. And then on Vanguard Rearguard Circle, when he hits a Vanguard, you Soul Blast 1, draw a card. So, like, this is actually one of the few good grade 2s to ride Descendant over, because it turns Descendant into a top 5 searcher and on hit draw. And then rounding out the grade 2s, Zuiten, because he's good. As you can see, I had to cut some cards out to make room for the Varinas, otherwise I'd have some more cards in here, but I think Varina is just too good to pass up in this particular build of Naru's. Then for the grade 1s, 4 copies of Eradicator Demolition Dragon. This card's fantastic, like easy, like one of the best additions to the Naru card pool. Vanguard Rearguard Circle. When his attack or the attack that he boosted hits, you can draw a card and then choose a card from your opponent's drop zone, and you may bind it. If you don't bind, he stays on the board, and you just keep getting that on-hit draw pressure that makes it annoying for your opponent. And if you do get the bind, then he goes into Soul. Not much to really say. Like, it's Demolition Dragon on Rearguard Circle in addition to Vanguard Circle. It pairs nicely with a Draconic Descendant on Vanguard, or just your Vanguard in general, because your opponent in this format likes to have damage to work with. And with this, your opponent's basically forced to either block it and not have damage, or they take it, but you're drawing, and you're potentially nuking cards out of their drop zone. Decks like Grand Blue, Mega Colony don't like that, or just anything that plays Archaea cards now. Yeah, Demolition Dragon is a fantastic to the card pool, and Vanguard plays this too for also similar reasons. Then 4 copies of Nusk. So much like Spark Race Dragon when placed on Vanguard Circle, but in this case, Rearguard Circle as well. Look at top 5 for an Eradicator, add it to hand, and then if you do, discard 1. There's a couple good Eradicator cards to play in here, so yeah, you just play this guy for consistency. Like, that's something this deck actually has compared to the Eradicators of old, is consistency. 3 Grade 3 Searchers, and then 2 copies of the Eradicator Perfect Guard from way back in the day. Searchable PGs are nice, not much to say here. Then for the triggers, 4 Stride crits, 4 Soul-Link crits. These being reprinted in the collection is actually very nice for just everyone in general, as some of these older crits have become a bit on the pricey side. Then 4 Eradicator grade heal triggers. Yeah, I figured like this over the Heal Guardian is worth considering in this deck, just because Nusk and Spark Race Dragon, and by extension Descendant, are able to search this, and having your G Guardians, which are very good on easier access, is always a nice thing to have in this deck. Then 2 draw PGs, 2 10k shield great draw triggers, and finally 1 over trigger, because people love over triggers, right? Then moving on to the G Zone, we've got 2 copies of Conquering Supreme Dragon, Exterminate Dragon. I didn't print another proxy, and I didn't print a proxy for the G Guardian at all, so here's Zillion. So Exterminate Dragon's skill says, when placed on Vanguard Circle, Soul Blast 1, and draw a card for each of your opponent's open, front, or rearguard circles, and then act Vanguard Circle once per turn, combos 1, and your front row gets 10k for each of your opponent's open, front, or rearguard circles. That is stupid good. Like, your opponent doesn't commit a board because they don't want to get blown up by Stunverse Dragon. So you draw cards and make your board big instead. This guy can easily give your front row 20k or more, which pairs really nicely when you've got Cho-Oh and Verena just going in on Axel circles. Like, this is an 18, 28, 38, 38, and this is a 14, 24, 34, 34, 34. It's very easy for your opponent to just suddenly be like, oh shit, I just took like 3 or 4 damage, because like these attacks are not small and they're constant. You need to be mindful of Brilliant Blister, I believe that's the name, the Mega Colony card that like screws over restanders, but like that's a small price to pay over the fact that these are like hand calls, so you don't get screwed over by Gradora's summon lock effect, and you can just bash face, which is really, really cool with Executor Dragon. And the card draws are also nice. Like, against an Axel deck that makes its board go away, I think like Nightmare Dolls, you can draw a lot on cards and just keep going. Like, fantastic card, pairs nicely with Stunverse Dragon, who of course we're still playing in here for obvious reasons. Only 2 copies now, because you can honestly get away with running less of it. Like, we're slowly getting to the point where the Narukami G Zone actually has options outside of Stunverse Dragon, and Executor Dragon is one of them. Like, now you don't have to just Stunverse. You can go Executor or Stunverse into Executor. And yeah, not much to say about that. 4 copies of Voltage as your finisher. Voltage is still your main kill button in this deck. 2 copies of V-Buster to flip up for Voltage, for Stunverse Dragon. And 1 copy of V-Max for the potential gotcha moment. Truth be told, I don't really see V-Max resolving much anymore, and you could honestly cut this guy. I just don't know what you would place him with, just because we still don't really have a lot of like good cards to go into outside of the ones I just showed. You can probably just play more G Guardians as options, I guess. And as you may notice, I don't have the Generation Break in here, because I figured you're not going to go into him that much anymore. Not when you can just stun verse, or execute, or voltage. So I just cut him out entirely. I guess you could go into any of the nation dragons like Drachma or Gilgar. Otherwise, I don't know what you would be playing here. Like I said, not a concrete deck list. You can make adjustments as you see fit. Then for the G Guardians, 2 copies of Impede Dragon. We all know this guy is good. 2 copies of Bulwark Dragon. You can honestly adjust the ratios on this now that we have Intercept Dragon, who is this guy here. As Bulwark and Intercept kind of have the same purpose of being big shields, except Intercept Dragon is more reliant on what your opponent does versus Bulwark Dragon being just a static big shield that also has the ability to kill things. But as far as what Intercept Dragon does, and I'm going to have his effect text in here, is when he's placed on Guardian Circle, your opponent chooses 2 of their front row rear guards and binds them. If they bind less than 2, then the wording is a bit awkward, but from what I was able to understand, if they bind 1 or less, then he gets 10k shield, and if they bind even less than that, so no cards at all, he gets a 10k shield on top of that. So he's a potential 20k shield, or a remove 1 or a remove 2. It just depends on the game state, because if your opponent really needs their attacks to go through, they're not going to bind anything. Or if your opponent just doesn't care and they want their big Vanguard attack to go through, they'll kill their 2 front row guys, which is kind of unfortunate. I was really hoping we'd have gotten a pseudo perfect guard like a lot of the other G Guardians in the set, but we'll still take Intercept Dragon. It clears the front row potentially, and it sets up Execute Dragon quite well. And that's more or less all I got to say about the deck. So yeah, that is Premium Eradicators for the premium format once the new set drops. Like I said, you have this, defensive Eradicators, and Vanquisher as your best options for taking advantage of the new guy. And this list is, again, not 100% the de facto way to go. You can make adjustments as you see fit. This is just the one that I'm currently working with. I really do like what the card brings to the deck. It patches up the weakness of Stunverse quite well, and if we ever get like a truly crazy grade 3 that breaks Stunverse, then this deck just may become like that topest of tier menaces that we keep hoping will happen, but always just does not for some reason or another. As it is, this deck will remain as a very solid rogue deck, tier 1.5, maybe low tier 1. Like the top decks are the top decks for a reason. And like at the end of the day, you're still playing Naros. Like there's always going to be like those consistency issues, and that this deck will have, this clan will have, whereas the other ones not so much. But we're slowly getting there, and this will always be a deck you have to respect at the table, because your opponent might just, well, be playing Naros, and you might forget what they do again, and suddenly, oops, Stunverse Dragon nuked your board, and you lost cards out of your hand. Or now Execute Dragon came in and just came at you with a bunch of plus 20k swings with restanders, and you're like, oh my god, I'm at 5, what do? And then like you try and push back and you get stuck first. And that's not much is really to say here, just waiting on to see what we get out of the upcoming clan collection and what it does in here. Vowing Sword Dragon Reverse is all but given. There's also potential for Dungeons Unlimited, and I'm kind of hoping for Dragonic Vanguard Sparking as well, to give that deck a much needed facelift. Either way, Naruto